Hello, it's nice to see you again. Over the past 3 sessions, we've talked about the first of the 5 elements of a happy life, which is relationships. Today, let's talk about the second element of a happy life, which is contribution. In the book about living a happy life, the topic of contribution is mentioned very briefly, just about a page, in the chapter on building relationships. Why is that? Perhaps it's because it's that difficult. Even though it's only a page, what I learned while translating this book is the concept of contribution as a way of being, or in English, contribution of being. When we usually talk about contribution, we always think of contribution through action. This refers to things like volunteering or having a job. However, what this book discusses is that our children contribute simply by their very existence. The author puts it this way: our children with disabilities also share many gifts with us. These include consideration, attentive listening, acceptance, tolerance, compassion, inspiration, gratitude, friendship, love, and respect. Although these gifts are often overlooked, they are crucial elements for the happiness of our society. In fact, these are the antidotes needed in a society that focuses solely on action. This is what the author says. I believe that not only I, but also many families raising children with disabilities will relate to this message. I too have come to realize many things that I would never have even thought about if my child did not have a disability. The work I am doing now at Here and Now, helping families with disabilities, is something I could never have imagined before having a child with a disability. As I get older, I realize even more the importance of the values in life mentioned above. Recently, while studying neuroscience and brain development to create a developmental program for children with disabilities, I came across a book. It is a book called Inner Communication by Professor Ju-Hwan Kim of Yonsei University. In that book, there is a chapter 10 on inner communication meditation for prefrontal cortex activation. And within it, there is a section called 6 Positive Inner Communication Meditations, which introduces the subtopics of forgiveness, compassion, love, acceptance, gratitude, and respect. It states that many neuroscience studies have reported positive effects such as forgiveness, compassion, love, acceptance, gratitude, and respect. Activating the prefrontal cortex, enhancing happiness, improving cognitive function, and strengthening immunity. When raising a child with disabilities, it is impossible not to think about these kinds of concepts. You end up doing a lot of meditation. I didn't realize it myself, but I think this too is a positive effect that I naturally gained while raising a child with disabilities. Of course, that doesn't mean I'm claiming to be someone with an extraordinary character, or that I've reached a state of enlightenment. I still have a long way to go. I'm always facing challenges and conflicts. But what I'm saying is that if I didn't have a child with disabilities, I wouldn't have realized these things. And because I've experienced them in real life rather than just as theories, I feel I've come to understand them much more deeply. Now, while the value of existence itself is important, work or a job is just as significant in a child's life, even if they have a disability. So from here, I will share some experiences related to volunteering and employment. First, when my child was in 10th grade, that is, at the age of 15, I created and began implementing a 15-year plan for my child. By the time they reached 10th grade, both schools and the local community offer various youth employment programs. If you search for employment programs for youth with developmental disabilities in Vancouver, you should be able to find information. Usually, youth become eligible for employment programs starting at age 16. If circumstances allow for both you and your child, I recommend giving it a try. In my case, since my child had already chosen a career as an animator and decided to major in animation in college, we did not participate in any employment programs before graduating high school. The only job-related experience before graduation was delivering the local newspaper. Let me introduce an organization that provides information on what needs to be prepared after graduating from high school. It's called VPTG, which stands for Vancouver Parent Transition Group. This organization mainly provides information and related seminars for families of youth with disabilities who are preparing for adulthood. If you leave your email address here they will send you information about the regular monthly seminars. They hold various seminars, and among them, there is an annual seminar on the topic of employment, training, and opportunities. After graduating from high school, the options related to employment are either receiving vocational training or finding a job right away. Vocational training is supported by the Ministry of Post-Secondary Education and Future Skills, abbreviated as PSFS. You can receive vocational training at vocational schools through a program called Accessible Education and Training, abbreviated as AET. Colleges and institutions that provide vocational training are listed on the PSFS website. In the Vancouver area, there are institutions such as Douglas College, KPU, University of the Fraser Valley, and Vancouver Community College. Major programs include customer service and cashier training, food service, and others. According to the websites of these schools, the program takes about 38 weeks to complete on a full-time basis. I've included the email address of the department in charge of the AET program and the relevant CLBC page link in the description of this video, so if you're interested, please refer to them. Now, if you want to find a job right after graduating from high school, there are two options available. One is through WorkBC and the other is through the CLBC, Employment Agency. WorkBC has an agency in every region, so you can search for and find the one in your area. To briefly explain the process, when you contact WorkBC, they will assign you an employment specialist. The specialist will introduce you to various employment programs and, during the process, conduct something called a vocational assessment. Depending on your situation, they provide support such as supported employment, customized employment, and self-employment support. In my experience, you don't get amazing results in a short period of time. It really takes a long time and it's not an easy process. Still, I think it's better than not doing it at all. In my child's case, they were introduced to a restaurant through WorkBC and are still working there now. It's not for long hours, about 4 hours a week. Anyway, once you contact WorkBC and register, they will guide you through the process, so you just need to follow their instructions. Another way is to go through a CLBC agency. There are agencies in each region that provide employment services. To receive this, you first need to apply for employment services with CLBC, and once CLBC refers you, you can receive the service. However, since this is a global funding system, you can only receive the service if there is an available spot. Otherwise, you have to wait until one opens up. Recently, a new program called LIFE, L-I-F-E, has been introduced, which is a community inclusion program, similar to a day program. You can think of it as a combination of the CI, Community Inclusion Program, and the Employment Program. Before being employed, individuals participate in the CI program, and once they get a job, they leave the CI program. If they lose their job, they rejoin the CI program. This is how it works. Not all agencies offer this program. It is mainly provided by larger agencies in each region. You can either contact one of the larger agencies in your area or search for the Employment Program or the LIFE program. So far, I have provided information related to employment, but based on my own experience and observing the situations of families around me, it is not easy to find even very simple jobs. In fact, if I put myself in the shoes of a store owner, I think that given the same minimum wage, there's really no particular reason to hire a person with a disability. Occasionally, there are people who have a heart for those with disabilities and do hire them, but in many cases, the employment does not last long. Since the employment situation in BC is tough even for the general population, it must be even more difficult for people with disabilities. Now, regarding employment, let's compare Canada, Korea, and the United States. It seems that Korea does not have disability support payments like Canada does. This is what's called PWD. Instead, there is a Disability Employment Act, which seems to require companies above a certain size to employ a set percentage of people with disabilities by law. If they fail to meet that percentage, they have to pay a fine. In this case, if a company that is required to pay a fine purchases products or services from a business that employs people with disabilities, it seems that the amount spent is deducted from the fine. So, by making good use of this situation, the number of companies employing people with disabilities has increased. One representative example of such a company, as far as I know, is better. It seems that the United States does not have a disability employment law like Korea, but instead, there are agencies that support the employment of people with disabilities. And if they successfully place someone in a job for a certain period, the government provides incentives. So, these agencies are highly motivated to work hard for the employment of people with disabilities. On the other hand, in the case of British Columbia, Canada, there is neither a disability employment law like Korea's, nor an incentive system for employment agencies like in the United States. Agencies like Work BC or CLBC, which support employment for people with disabilities, do make their own efforts, but it doesn't seem like they work as fiercely to promote disability employment as in Korea or the United States. Still, British Columbia in Canada has an income assistance program called PWD, so there is less pressure to have a job purely for economic reasons, which for us is actually quite a relief. As of March 2025, the PWD amount is close to $600 per month. You can receive both the disability benefit and employment income up to $1,600 to $200 per year. However, if your annual employment income exceeds $1,600 to $200, the disability benefit will start to be reduced depending on your income level. Although the employment environment for people with disabilities is not easy, disability support payments and community inclusion funding do help guarantee a certain quality of life for people with disabilities. If, in addition to this, they are able to find employment, their quality of life will improve even more. From my experience with employing people with disabilities, I believe that the approach to hiring should not be about fitting people with disabilities into existing jobs, but rather about creating jobs that they can do. Even with the YouTube editing work I'm currently doing, instead of following the methods used by professional editors, I've developed a process that allows friends with disabilities to participate in the work. All of this is truly very difficult. Still, I believe that this approach will lead to meaningful employment for people with disabilities. As part of these efforts, one of our dreams is to create a social enterprise dedicated to employing people with disabilities. Jobs are not just about earning money. They are extremely important for improving quality of life in terms of building relationships. The problem, as I mentioned earlier, is that it's not easy to get a job. Of course, it would be best to find a paid job, but if that's not possible, and if they are able, I believe it is also very meaningful for our children with disabilities to seek out volunteer opportunities in terms of building relationships and improving quality of life. Here, I will briefly introduce the volunteer activities that my child participates in. My child volunteers once a month at an organization that helps homeless people. And once every 2 weeks, my child volunteers at an organization where they spend time with adolescents with developmental disabilities. At church, my child volunteers with the media team by creating PowerPoint presentations, helps out with the welcoming team, and occasionally serves on the praise team as a piano accompanist. And whenever the opportunity arises, my child also joins in on mission trips to serve indigenous communities. The reason I am sharing about my child is so that you can get some ideas from these examples. Besides these, I think it's also good to actively participate if there are other opportunities to volunteer. Of course, you can't force your child to do something they really dislike, but as long as they're somewhat okay with it. Now, let's talk a bit about hobbies. I hope you'll also consider the possibility of connecting your child's favorite hobbies to volunteering or even a future career. Again, I'll share my child's experience. My child graduated from an animation department but wasn't able to get a job in that field. However, they still draw digitally and make cards, illustrations, and clothes to sell at local markets. They don't make a lot of sales, and rather than focusing on making money, they enjoy interacting with other artists and vendors at the local market through their work. These days, they also compose music using digital tools. Again, it's not something that brings in much money, but by pursuing what they love as a hobby, they continuously share their work online and connect with the world. Who knows? You never know when or where a big break might happen. Even if it doesn't make money, I also hope that the skills honed through these hobbies could be used to serve by creating illustrations or comics based on the Bible or by composing praise songs. I believe that my child is able to live their life by volunteering as a hobby and working part-time 2 or 3 days a week thanks to a lot of support, such as government disability benefits, CI, funding, RDSP, and employment services. I am once again deeply grateful for this kind of support. Now, I will wrap things up. The contributions I have mentioned so far are very closely related to relationships. Among the 5 elements of a happy life that we talk about, home, choice, and finances are games without an opponent. Contribution and relationships, on the other hand, are games that involve others. For a home or financial stability, having money is enough, and respecting choices simply means legally providing what your child wants. However, jobs and relationships are a bit different because they require another party. For a job, someone has to hire you, and for relationships, you need to form them with someone else. To go a bit further, in fact, even the other elements actually require relationships as well. In other words, you need someone to live with in a home, someone to look after and respect your child's choices, and someone to manage financial matters. Therefore, all these elements of happiness are impossible without relationships. Once again, I want to emphasize the importance of relationships. Well, that's all I have to say for today. Next time, I'll be back to talk about the third element, home. Thank you for watching.